On today's World Insight, Hong Kong pushing back against the tide of COVID infections with citywide testing, isolation, and treatment. The HKSAR's progress against the pandemic and ties with the mainland, in the words of the chief executive and a legislative council member who also has a seat at the CPPCC.
The central government is always behind us, giving us all the support.
And China walking the tightrope between speedy economic growth and carbon cut targets. A reality check from a seasoned investor and longtime CPPCC member.
Hello, I'm Tian Wei, and this is World Insight. We begin with an eye on the worsening pandemic situation in Hong Kong. While the Special Administrative Region was successful in controlling the virus last year, recent COVID cases spiked to around 500,000. Chief Executive Carrie Lam on Wednesday said the city was still making plans for universal COVID-19 testing while focusing its resources on caring for the elderly residents amid a surge of infections.
There's a common view that we have to implement compulsory universal testing. And when we talk about this, it might not be just one test, but 2 tests or 3. Hopefully then, if there are still silent transmission chains or carriers, they could be identified and isolated. And in this way, Hong Kong could bring this wave of the pandemic to an end, or we could come out of this pandemic situation.
That's Carrie Lam, Chief Executive of Hong Kong. The central authorities in China has already sent several health experts to Hong Kong to help curb the latest outbreak. How can the city government better contain the COVID spread and get the city back on track? On the sidelines of this year's 2 sessions, I spoke to CPPCC member Kenneth Falk, who's also a member of the Hong Kong Legislative Council. He said he's grateful for the help from the central government and frontline medical staff. Besides the pandemic, he also touched on the mindset change of Hong Kongers in the past 25 years since the city returned to the motherland. Ken, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Wei.
What about the situations in Hong Kong? Earlier, you were talking on the sidelines of the 2 sessions about the latest.
So first of all, I would like to say that we're very grateful, for all the help we are getting from the central government, no matter on the professional help and also in terms of materials, medical supplies, or even, day-to-day materials that we're getting from the mainland. We had the pleasure of meeting Vice Premier Han Zheng a few days ago. And I was very it's very heartwarming. It's a very grave situation. A lot of Hong Kongers are in dire, situations, to be frank. But I think having Mr. Han, saying that the central government is always behind us, giving us all the support. And I'm even more moved to hear him say that, he's been receiving a lot of calls from even different provinces, different cities around China, and even private corporations putting their hands up, willing to help Hong Kong. Practical solutions, I'm actually very happy as well. I'm receiving a lot of materials from different parties and hoping that I could help distribute to people. And we're getting masks, we're getting rapid test kits. I'm even, trying to secure food supplies, fruits and vegetables in case of a lockdown. So these are things that daily I talk to staff. And actually the problem we're getting now, funnily enough, it may not be the supplies. It's how to distribute. The logistics is a big problem now in Hong Kong. We have things, but we have to strike a balance. We don't want people to queue. We don't want people to come up to private, areas and to create a risk. But as we know, a lot of, say, logistic companies, even the Hong Kong Post, will be stopping because of the pandemic. So this is a big situation. We can't get supplies to the right people. So these are the things that we have to face, and we have to solve one by one.
Do you think some of the earlier experiences by some mainland cities could be of help in Hong Kong's case, even though the numbers in Hong Kong is much higher.
But I think at the end of the day, I think it's about whether we're prepared. We have to. I'm sure we'll ride this through in the end of the day. But with the pandemic, who knows what's happening next? Touch wood. We don't want the sixth wave, but we can't say for definitely that it's not going to be here. So actually, there's another thing that Mr. Han Zheng mentioned is that with the 2 years, China has really learned our way of dealing with the pandemic. And he mentioned in our big cities, they are always on alert, right? There are already isolation facilities. The supply is plenty. People with volunteer teams ready to go in a moment's notice. And in Hong Kong, we need to be prepared too. And sad to say, I feel that perhaps we've been too relaxed for the past year. We enjoyed 1 year of COVID-free situation, and in terms of isolation facilities, in terms of building a volunteer team and supplies, maybe we've been too complacent. So moving forward, I think we need to work with the mainland authorities on a united strategy on how to deal with the pandemic, because Hong Kong's #1 priority now is to open the border with Guangdong. A lot of people are suffering because people with factories or businesses in mainland. Me personally, I haven't been back to Guangzhou in 2 years. I've been to 2 sessions in a closed loop, but even this time, I don't dare to go out and venture off because for business. So I think this is #1, and this goes hand in hand with how do we deal with the pandemic, because we can't put the mainland and Guangdong at risk because of a different strategy. So this is something that I think the government has to think about.
Some have been arguing Hong Kong's uniqueness to a certain extent. For example, communication with different groups of people living in Hong Kong, not necessarily even Hong Kongers themselves. Some are just working and living in Hong Kong from very different cultures. And it is a huge mega city, even though Hong Kong is practicing dynamic zero policy. Your take?
Yes, I think we embrace the differences, but at the end of the day, we are a city within China. So I think a lot of communication, we need to be more open. I don't think we can't just focus ourselves on differences and the different way of life or different policy making. I think in terms of policy now, not just in COVID, I think but in all city govern-wise policy, we need to be in line with China. We need to really treasure what the positioning that the mainland China has given us. The 8 centers, for example, finance, logistics, innovation, for example, and culture. These are the positions that we could contribute to the bigger picture. So I think this differences in the way of life, in a way, gives us an advantage, and we should make use of this advantage. But again, I think unity is a big thing. We need to work closer together, more communications.
How do you see this change of, if I could use the word mindset, vis-a-vis some of the challenges Hong Kong is absolutely going through over the past few years?
Change in mindset of the. No, I think it's good. I think it's good, especially in the new era, and also within the new patriots governing Hong Kong situation with the 90 new elected legislative members. I think the expectation, not just from central government, but expectation from the people, is that we need to be doing more. Right? It's not just about debating and playing the blame game. Hopefully that era is gone. After all these legislations, the new election system. So now we have to put our words into action. And pushing government's one thing, but I think we need to do it ourselves. So, for example, my constituency, I represent sports and culture. And moving forward, how do we use sports and culture into integration into the mainland? That's something that I need to focus on. So on the small scale, when the pandemic subsides, I would be doing more of these tours on exchanges and cooperation between our sports people, our cultural people, and the Greater Bay Area. There's not the government's legislation, but I feel that I need to be doing it or leading these projects to give them opportunity to go in. And the second thing is, I think, since we're talking about this topic, I think it's important also to change the mindset. In terms of culture and sports, in China and the mainland, they are not just talking about the number of shows or how many medals we get at the Olympics, but we are hoping that sports and culture can really be a new economic driver for the whole country, and for young people to be able to benefit from sports and culture, not just as a sportsman, but the sports industry, cultural industry as a whole. But in Hong Kong, it's still government driven. So government every year they spend X amount of money into subsidizing shows and events, right? So I think in Hong Kong, I think we need to really start building or start allowing them to really embrace the idea of turning sports and culture into an industry.
You got some experiment ground already, Kenneth, one could argue, because you are being invited by the chief executive to be on the board for the West Kowloon Cultural District, which is a huge cultural project for Hong Kong and anyone visiting Hong Kong. You have also been, playing a very active role in sports. For example, being the vice chair of the Olympic Committee for Hong Kong. So tell me more about how you are specifically looking at some of the initiatives, how you are already doing your work.
Okay. I think two things. I think to follow on with what I was saying just now, this West Kowloon is definitely a new opportunity. Okay, I think for the culture scene, West Kowloon is very, very important moving forward. But I don't see West Kowloon as just a place with a lot of facilities. But I think what's important is to strengthen West Kowloon's position in terms of how do we want to take the cultural industry. In China, we have a lot of strong industry, a lot of players, even internet companies, high-tech companies who are involved in creation of a culture. We're not talking about shows. We're not just talking about contents. We're talking about, say, IP creation. We're talking about all this. So I think West Kowloon could really fulfill a role here too, and really actively seek opportunities for these companies to come to Hong Kong and help Hong Kong, cultural artists and people in the industry to gain this kind of business or industry related knowledge. So this is something that I would be doing myself. And you mentioned in terms of sports, I think sports is also, the Chinese government has given us a good opportunity. In 2025, we are going to host the national games with Guangdong and Macau. The way I see it, it's not just a game. I'm 100% confident on the ability for the Guangdong government to host any mega event sports. Okay, this is not the problem. The stadiums, the logistics, everything will be perfect. But how do we use this opportunity to set up a system so that the three places, Hong Kong, Macau, can work together? And this is what I'm doing moving forward, is hopefully, especially young people, how do we use this opportunity to let more young people to understand the GBA? So this is what I'll be doing.
I feel a lot of can-do spirit. It is filling my room, in fact, right now, just listening to what you have been talking about. But, people would say it's not that easy. I just don't know, for a young legislative council member like you, how would you be able to push things forward?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's right. You got to talk the talk, but you got to do the show, right? I think that's this important thing. I think it takes time. I think looking back 3 years, the Greater Bay Area the plan is unveiled for many years already, right? At the beginning, I still remember many years ago, we say, oh, it's so close to go to Guangzhou, everyone should try. And I get feedback, say of course, if it's easier said, but the cost and everything involved is high. But we've seen the past 3 years, actually, in terms of cost and time and everything, we've been working slowly but surely to break down barriers. Yes, it takes time. But there are progress being made in terms of a system of integration. So on this end, we would encourage more people just to take the leap and try. Secondly, how do we promote the success story? How do we make sure that it will be easier, especially for young people in Hong Kong? In the new policies, they are now, the group that I'm involved with, the Hong Kong Youth Association, they have set up different stations and offices in mainland China, a hotline to help young people to start their business, to learn about the business environment, to know about the law, how do you open a bank account, all these things, how do you open a telephone card, how do you get, social security, what to do in a hospital. These are things that, the day-to-day living. People might feel foreign, but we are trying our little bit to be able to help.
You bring a lot of energy, Kenneth, and it's like a breath of fresh air in a way to see a legislative council member like you act, think, and speak very differently from maybe the previous generations.
And it's not just me. I think with this new system in LegCo, what we're seeing is a lot of people of my generation, they're actually willing to contribute to Hong Kong. In the previous, I wouldn't divide it by generation or age, but in the previous system in Hong Kong, we are seeing a lot of conflict. And even though a lot of people are willing to help and step out, they did not do so. But now, with the new system, I think a lot of people they're really go-getters and doers. They're really willing to contribute in any way they can, not just in LegCo, but outside. So I think we have to keep positive. And what I'm doing, especially for my constituency, is really hoping to provide opportunities. How do we, take a lead in organizing programs, be it mobilizing people. But one thing that I pledged in my electoral campaign is really to bridge different sectors. I think we are in times of unity. This time, when we're in Beijing, even the CPPCC report and the government work report, a big common theme is unity. How do we get unified? How do we push it forward? So I think in terms of Hong Kong, I think I'm lucky enough to have different resources in different fields, not just sports and culture. Maybe in business as well, even in mainland China or internationally. How do we pull these resources together to better our sector? I think that's important as well. These are things that take time, but I think if there's a will, there's a way.
Dare to think, dare to dream. That's Kenneth Fok, CPPCC member and a member of the Hong Kong Legislative Council. Still to come in the program on World Insight, China walking the tightrope between speedy economic growth and carbon cut targets. A reality check from a seasoned investor and longtime CPPCC member. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is World Insight with me, Tian Wei. At the 2 sessions of every year, the government work report is one of the most important documents. According to a report this year, China will stand by the commitments to green low-carbon targets. As the world's largest developing country, China faces a huge challenge in achieving the goals of carbon peaking by the year 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. To make inroads, China has launched the world's largest carbon market last year. What are the realities of these carbon exchanges? How can China keep economic growth while sticking to its commitments to environmental protection and sustainable development? On the sidelines of this year's 2 sessions, I spoke to Yi Chen-jiang, a well-known investor and chairman and CEO of City Capital, who served the CPPCC for 15 years. This is already, shall I say, our 5th year to talk to each other during your current term. You definitely have been hearing very clearly about the government work report. According to government work report, China will, quote, to orderly move toward carbon peaking and carbon neutrality. How do you understand that phrase? A lot of people are trying to interpret it.
Since the carbon peaking and carbon neutrality goals were announced by President Xi in, I believe, September 2020, the government has always stressed that it's a long-term goal. Although in short term, we should start focusing on it. I think that this particular work report is emphasizing the orderly process, orderly approach. This is in light of what happened last year when some of the emission cutting goals were being implemented at provincial levels, where officials taking a fairly rough approach by cutting out of power and so on and so forth. And that is clearly not the way to implement it. The work report also emphasized the new approach being, in Chinese, it's 先立后破. My own interpretation is you have to establish new before you let go of the old. So the overall approach is going to be much more orderly and gradual, but the objective remains the same.
We've seen carbon trading centers being established, of course, using market-based initiatives. The MBI is a great tool. How do you see the realities of these carbon exchanges?
These are fairly new in China. A national carbon trading platform was established in July of last year. So far, the members on that exchange are only open to the power industry, where obviously most of the emission is generated. So they are allowed, they each are assigned a certain amount of quota on carbon emission, and so they trade among themselves when there's a need to, for one party to increase quota, the another party to decrease. As a result, it's not a very active market. The price for carbon, it's fairly low at this point. It's roughly about 50 renminbi per ton, as opposed to, end of last year, is roughly over 100 euro per ton in Europe. Now, that has decreased in Europe in recent days down to roughly about 60 euro per ton. So it's still, we're talking about almost 1 to 10 difference. So I think that exchanges overall have to be more open to allow other players to come in, investors as well as the end users, other end users, so that there could be more active trading, more participation, at the same time better price discovery, which the signal that can be transmitted into the rest of the economy.
Mr. Zhang, the world is changing very fast as we speak. There's a hotspot crisis going on, between Russia and Ukraine. There are many other things, geopolitics moving very fast. So China, of course, has been committed to 2030, 2060, these goals, that's for sure. And China already, government report indicate, it's going to orderly implement that. But having said that, though, different priorities pop up at different times. How do you see, carbon still as a priority given the complexities these days?
Well, the commitment to the ultimate goals in 2030 and 2060 does not mean a linear sort of implementation. So initially, it will zigzag, would take there will be a period of acceleration, there will be a period of slowing down, but the ultimate goals remain the same. Given the geopolitical tension, given high energy prices, it's almost unavoidable this year we need to focus on the stability of the economy, which means, of course, we want to be aware of carbon emission. We want to cut down on energy use, but fundamentally we have to ensure, that there is enough energy for the economy and for people's lives.
Yeah. Also, the same question about coal. Of course, there were a lot of criticism about using coal by China, by some of the others. Yet, China has been practicing clean coal technology and also to streamline the earlier old power plants and update the technologies. Things are very different now. And now, with the complexity that we earlier touched on, where do you think is coal?
Coal will remain sort of in the center of China's primary energy use. I don't think even with the commitment to the carbon objectives that will change, because fundamentally that's the energy form. That's China it's can mostly rely on. Now the question is, can we use it cleanly using new technology? So I think China is making good progress in that front, and ultimately I think we will coal, oil or gas, and at the same time I think China is also increasing the proportion of renewables like wind and solar, and China is also trying to increase hydro power and to a certain extent nuclear energy as well. So but I don't think coal will be eliminated. Coal will be a big part of the energy use in China, but in a clean way. So.
But Mr. Zhang, since you are a financier yourself, you are an investor, well known in China and beyond. Tell me more. Where would you put, carbon trading into the overall portfolio if you have one of your own?
Well, I think in our own investments, in our own business activities, we have to be more aware of carbon emission. In our portfolio company, we also trying to implement more of these carbon objectives. For example, in McDonald's China, last year when we're opening almost 800 restaurants, and most of them are going to meet ESG standards like certified by LEED and so on and so forth. And at the same time, we have another portfolio company, TrustLink, which is a facility management for industrial parks, and we've been putting up solar panels on almost every one of the buildings that we manage. So these are things that we can all do in our normal business activities to help to cut carbon emission.
Yichen Zhang, once again, thank you so much. Congratulations for 15 years serving as member of CPPCC.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Yichen Zhang, CPPCC member, talking about China carbon peak and neutrality. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of my team at the two sessions and in our Beijing headquarters of CGTN. Thanks for being with us, and I'll see you tomorrow.